Every once in a while, 29 fan bases merge into one. Regional biases, age-old rivalries, stylistic differences. They all fade into the background as the world comes together to support one daring underdog, fighting back against the odds. It's a rare phenomenon, born out of a revived belief, and the last time we saw it was 2018.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
After a full year of orbiting one opponent, the Rockets' title bid finally touched down in Houston. The crowd was in a frenzy, screaming with so much consistency, it felt like TNT was pumping noise into the broadcast. A gladiatorial welcome for the only group brave enough to follow the numbers wherever they led, even if it meant banishing the beautiful game and bringing back the ISO.
Oh man, hard. Oh, he stared at Wesley Johnson and then he hits a three. Wow.
By now, the plan was well established. The Rockets were going to hunt Golden State's worst defenders and pick and rolls, feed Harden and CP3 all the touches they could stomach. It was simple, but brutally effective all the same. The backbone of a 65-win team, a formula so efficient, it shattered the regular season. All year, that stagnant and predictable system had given their two engines the clarity to pick defenses apart as they swarmed opposing offenses with effort and versatility on the other end. If they followed the game plan, stuck to their strengths, and made things difficult for Golden State on the other end, there was a chance. Home court advantage, a proven approach, enough reinforced firepower to challenge any offense imaginable, all the necessary ingredients for a generational upset. Unfortunately, none of that mattered in game one. Kevin Durant rose above every switch like a man playing a different sport, and even after one quiet half from Steph Curry, he reminded all of them who invented the three-point avalanche. And inside that cauldron of noise, the Rockets fell by double digits. Of course it wasn't over, but in the eyes of the spectators, the people who believed that this was a hopeful long shot in the first place, it looked like reality was quickly closing in. Houston rebounded in game two, notched a 22-point win thanks to the characteristically monumental advantage and three-pointers made. It was a nice response, something that probably meant something inside that locker room. Outside of those huddles though, game one had confirmed what we all suspected. The effort was admirable, the conviction inspiring, but the mission flawed from the start. Some problems don't have solutions, and not every story has a David.
Many years ago, the great British explorer George Mallory, who was to die on Mount Everest, was asked why did he want to climb it. He said because it is there. Well, space is there, and we're going to climb it.
The series was headed to Oracle Arena, and that alone was enough to cause despair. Not before or since has there been a home court with that kind of deafening advantage as the one in Oakland, California. Oracle was a basketball graveyard, haunted by the Bay Area anthems of Too Short and E40. Every three invited an eruption, and every run demanded a roar. Beating the Warriors when they left home was a dream in its own right. Beating them in Oakland was a desperate wish, and Game 3 was just another massacre. A 40-point dismantling painted with Steph Curry threes and Houston turnovers. It was only a 2-1 lead, but the Rockets would have to win on the Warriors' home floor to have a chance. And after that last game, that felt categorically impossible. Game 4 was a breaking point. The good news for Houston was Andre Iguodala would be watching from the sidelines with an injury. The bad news though, the other 4 Hall of Famers would still be suiting up, and the crowd would be arriving 2 hours early, adorned in team merch and inhuman enthusiasm. The world looked on through a wince, just brave creative enough to watch, just realistic enough to doubt. And then the game began the only way it possibly could have. A swift 12-0 start for the Warriors. In the blink of an eye, Houston was in a double-digit hole with the crowd roaring. Channels started changing. Jerseys were tossed back in the closets. This was it. The predictable and inevitable death of a dream that was never meant to be. At least it was quick. The Rockets were supposed to understand this, but no one ever told them to stop fighting. All of a sudden, they were back in it, stuck in a tug of war with the heavyweight champion of the world. And when they looked closely, those champs looked tired. They were grinding their teeth, clawing, struggling. That relaxed air of invulnerability was gone. For the first time all season, the Warriors felt threatened. Houston kept pushing, responding to every run, matching every burst, and taking control of the tempo at every opportunity. By the final possession,
couple of possibilities here. That can be a catch and shoot for a tie for Golden State, or Houston commit a foul as Livingston inbounds. He has Curry. This is for the tie, and that will do it.
As the ball hit the rim, the crowd sat there, stunned, quiet for the first time in years. That was enough. There was finally a team with the chance to reset the balance of power, to break the atmosphere, and restore our faith in the existence of possibility, onward and upward.
Even though I realize that this is, in some measure, an act of faith and vision, for we do not now know what benefits await us.
Game 5 was back at home, an opportunity to push Golden State to the brink of elimination, with a rabid home crowd drenched in red shaking the ground in their honor. Both sides looked tense, their stars stiff under the pressure, but in the defining moments, the Rockets came through. Eric Gordon delivered a crucial 24 points. Chris Paul continued working miracles, shimmying right back at Steph Curry, and Clint Capella fought Draymond tooth and nail for every rebound that bounced off the rim. It felt like a live high-wire act. No margin for error, no space for missteps. Any lull could be fatal, and somehow Houston never blinked. Here they were, another 2-point lead with 10 seconds to go, and another stop to seal the win. The crowd celebrated like it was New Year's Eve. The Dubs walked off the floor with their heads hung low, and NBA Twitter rejoiced. Everything that once felt so distant was now just one game away. The Warriors were beatable, the Rockets could do it, and in a couple of years, this reign of terror would be nothing more than a harmless memory that lasted for just one season. For the first time in 2 years, the throne was up for grabs. And then the news broke.
And that breaking news from the Rockets: within the last 30 minutes, we have learned that Chris Paul will have to sit out Game 6 against the Warriors tomorrow night. Paul left in the fourth quarter of last night's game due to a hamstring injury.
Chris Paul was out with a hamstring. The second creator, the alternate conductor, the point guard himself, sidelined for the foreseeable future. If it happened a game earlier, it would have been a death sentence. But Houston didn't have to be better than Golden State. They just had to be better once, and they still had 2 chances to prove it. The first would be an uphill battle, a Warriors team with their back against the wall, in an arena full of rabid supporters. The Rockets did what they could. Eric Gordon slid into the starting lineup. Trevor Ariza took 18 shots in hopes of making up for the scoring discrepancy. But without CP3, there was no hope in that environment. The Dubs ran away with a 29-point win, booking one more flight back to Texas. One last showdown, with the season's sunset in the background. Mike D'Antoni knew the hand he had. They wouldn't win this game the usual way. They couldn't rely on Harden to match Golden State's offensive potential on his own, and they couldn't ask Eric Gordon to fill that playmaking void. If they were going to win this game, it would be based on sheer audacity, leaning into everything that got them here so far, trusting the math, betting on the analytics, and rejecting any ounce of reason that didn't serve them. This would have to be a 3-point barrage, a compounding bet on the game's greatest equalizer. All they needed needed was for a few players to catch fire, just a couple of surprises, and the impossible would start to feel negotiable. Through the first half, they navigated the chaos. Harden jumped passing lanes with reckless abandon. The supporting cast hoisted up as many threes as they could, and even with an equal amount of points from beyond the arc, Houston was leading, up by 12 points, 24 minutes away from the unthinkable. All that was left now was to follow through with everything that was emphasized since training camp began. One final half of execution, standing between them and the great unknown. They started the third quarter with the same principles in mind, spacing the floor, prioritizing the most valuable shot in basketball, doing what was necessary to keep up with the offensive machine staring back at them. At first, it just looked like a run-of-the-mill cold streak, and then it spiraled into something catastrophic.
Harden behind the screen, and Gordon for three. Gordon for three. Is Harden will off. Harden, Ariza for three. Harden comes up short. There's Williams. Gordon is open. Three. Way off. Here's Harden forced to three. Ariza cannot find the lane. If it's the range, is there a point breaking where you stop shooting? Gordon on a step back three.
The Rockets went 0 for 14 from 3 in the third, and the Warriors took a 7-point lead. There was still time for a comeback. Houston still believed. Still enough left on the clock for a last gasp effort, but the rim never softened, ending the game 6 for 44 from deep, with 27 consecutive misses buried somewhere in the middle of that. That was it, the dull final note of a symphony that moved us all. Harden ran out of gas. Chris Paul looked on from the sideline, and the world regretted any inkling of hope they felt as Golden State marched back to the finals. A reactionary wave of confirmation bias swept across the landscape. D'Antoni was still just the crazed maniac addicted to flying too close to the sun. The system was too reliant on the numbers. Harden was too ball dominant, and Chris Paul was a loser with endless excuses. They didn't watch the assembly. They resisted the rise, but the whole world showed up for the fall, ready to discuss and dissect an effort built on precise calculations, carefully formed chemistry, and endless tweaks, with just a snapshot and a preconceived notion to go off of. The Rockets didn't get it done, and in the eyes of the public, that meant they never could have.
And the moon and the planets are there, and new hopes for knowledge and peace are there. And therefore, as we set sail, we ask God's blessing on the most hazardous and dangerous and greatest adventure on which man has ever embarked.
We struggle with that assumption of inevitability. That's not because we have an affinity for the analytics. We aren't pushing an agenda or repairing a legacy. We just can't ignore the full picture. For 2 years, the Warriors rampaged through every team in the league without the slightest effort, except for the Rockets. Houston, with their experimental blend of matchup hunting, science-backed shot profiles, and good old-fashioned effort, pushed the invincible to its breaking point. They came one hamstring and a couple of bad bounces away from toppling an immortal empire, and we aren't willing to write it off as a losing battle. Competition isn't binary. Our interpretation of it is. Our memory only has room for winners and losers. Every team falls into one category or the other, and in the process, we lose everything that made us watch in the first place. The daring adjustments, the collective sacrifice, the unflinching investment, a bet made by a connected group on themselves and what they could do against the expectations imposed on them. It's the essence of self-determination, the belief in the face of overwhelming evidence that the odds are beatable, and whether you're willing to admit it or not, the 2018 Rockets are evidence that they are, proof that the game is unfair, that a bad break can sink a mission, and affirmation that the stars are reachable, that they aren't just taunting you, that you could see the night sky for a reason, a fleeting preview of infinity, and a sobering reminder of fragility. So in our eyes, Mike D'Antoni is a genius cursed by fate, James Harden is a legend, and Chris Paul is a myth. One moment doesn't erase another, and a story's final sentence doesn't negate every word that came before it. So let us end this video with a clear thesis statement. In 2018, the Rockets broke the atmosphere. Even if they came back down the moment after, we don't care about the fall. It's the height that inspired us.